Marcus Rodriguez bought a failing gas station for $1 in front of a crowd that included executives from 3 major oil companies. But here's the thing. Not one of them tried to outbid him. That's because they knew exactly what Marcus would find when he started digging, and they were counting on him never finding the courage to look. What Marcus discovered beneath pump number 3 would expose the biggest price-fixing conspiracy in American history, cost these companies hundreds of millions in fines, and turn a desperate mechanic into the most feared whistleblower in the oil industry. But first, let me tell you how a man with $53 in his bank account ended up owning property that billion-dollar corporations had been guarding for 15 years. Marcus Rodriguez stood outside the courthouse in Millbrook, Texas, on a Tuesday morning that would change everything. The auction notice in his weathered hands advertised the Sunoco station on Route 47. Failing business, sold as is, minimum bid $1. $53. That's all Marcus had left after losing his job at Peterson's Auto Repair the month before. The owner had cited economic downturn, but Marcus knew the truth. Peterson's had been undercutting local competitors for years, and when the big chain stores moved in, the smaller shops couldn't compete. Marcus had worked there for 8 years, ever since graduating high school. Good with his hands, better with engines. But now at 26, he was discovering that loyalty meant nothing when profit margins got tight. The gas station sat on a corner lot, its red and blue sign faded to pink and grey. 2 pumps stood like sentinels over cracked concrete, and the convenience store windows were covered with yellowed newspaper. Marcus had driven past it countless times, watching it deteriorate over the past 2 years since the owner, Earl Hutchins, had given up trying to compete with the new Supermart gas station 3 miles down the highway. But Marcus saw something others didn't. The location was prime, right at the intersection where Route 47 met County Road 15, with steady traffic from the industrial park and the farming community beyond. The building was solid, the underground tanks were relatively new, and most importantly, it was something he could afford. Well, almost afford. The auction was set for 10 in the morning. Marcus arrived at 9:30 to find a crowd larger than expected. Not the usual collection of bargain hunters and scrap dealers, but men in expensive suits with briefcases and corporate badges. He recognized the logos immediately. Texaco, Shell, ExxonMobil. Odd crowd for a $1 auction, said a voice beside him. Marcus turned to find an elderly man with kind eyes and calloused hands. Tom Bradley, the man introduced himself. Ran the hardware store here for 32 years before selling out to Home Depot. Marcus Rodriguez. And yeah, seems like a lot of interest for a failing business. Tom studied the corporate representatives with a frown. Been wondering about that place for years. Earl always said something wasn't right about how his suppliers treated him. Got the worst prices, delayed deliveries, equipment that kept breaking down. Almost like someone wanted him to fail. Before Marcus could respond, the auctioneer called for attention. A thin man with a nervous disposition, he seemed uncomfortable with the crowd he was addressing. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to auction the Sunoco station at 1247 Route 47, including all buildings, equipment, and mineral rights to the property. Minimum bid is $1. Do I hear $1? Marcus raised his hand. $1. He expected immediate competition, especially from the corporate representatives. Instead, the crowd fell silent. The men in suits didn't even look at him. They were watching each other, their faces revealing nothing but their body language screaming tension. Do I hear $2? The auctioneer called, his voice cracking slightly. Nothing. Marcus looked around in confusion. A Shell executive was writing frantically in a notebook. The Texaco representative had pulled out his phone and was typing urgently. None of them were bidding. Going once, the auctioneer said, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. Going twice. Still nothing. The gavel came down with unusual force. Sold to the gentleman in the blue jacket for $1. The corporate representatives began filing away immediately, their conversations hushed but intense. Marcus caught fragments as they passed. Should have told him about the maintenance records. 15 years of careful management down the drain. Depends on whether he's smart enough to look. Tom Bradley shook his head as they approached the auctioneer's table. 32 years in this town, son, and I've never seen anything like that. Those men weren't here to bid. They were here to watch. Watch what? Watch to see who'd be fool enough to buy a problem they couldn't solve themselves. Marcus signed the paperwork with a hand that trembled slightly. $1 plus $63 in fees and taxes left him with negative $11 in his checking account. But he owned a gas station. The auctioneer handed him the keys with obvious relief. Congratulations, Mr. Rodriguez. Property's yours as of right now. Good luck. The way he said good luck sounded more like a prayer than a pleasantry. Marcus drove to his new property alone, the corporate representatives having disappeared as quickly as they'd arrived. The keys felt heavier than they should in his pocket. The station looked even more run down up close. Weeds grew through cracks in the concrete, and the metal canopy over the pumps showed rust spots that looked like brown tears. But the structure was sound, and Marcus's trained eye could see possibilities others missed. The front door opened with a squeal that echoed across the empty lot. Inside, dust motes danced in shafts of afternoon sunlight. The shelves were empty, but the refrigeration units hummed quietly, suggesting the power was still connected. The cash register was gone, but the counter was solid wood that could be restored. Marcus made his way to the small office behind the main store. Earl Hutchins had left it surprisingly clean. File cabinets organized, desk cleared, even the wastebasket emptied. Too clean, actually. It looked like someone had scrubbed away every trace of the previous owner's presence. Except for one thing. In the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, Marcus found a manila folder marked Maintenance, Underground Storage. The records inside went back 15 years, far longer than Earl's ownership. Page after page of inspection reports, repair orders, and compliance certifications. But as Marcus read through them, something seemed wrong. The dates were consistent, the documentation thorough, but the work described didn't match what he'd expect for a failing station. According to these records, the underground tanks had been serviced every 6 months like clockwork. Professional cleaning, corrosion inspection, leak detection, maintenance that would cost thousands of dollars annually. Who spends that kind of money maintaining tanks at a failing gas station? Marcus checked the signatures on the work orders. 3 different companies had performed the maintenance over the years: Petroleum Solutions Inc., Tank Tech Services, and Underground Systems Corp. He'd never heard of any of them, which was odd since he knew most of the industrial service companies in the area. Even stranger, the work had continued right up until last month, just weeks before the auction. Someone had been paying to maintain this property long after it stopped making money. The afternoon was fading as Marcus decided to inspect the tanks themselves. The access ports were located behind the building, covered by heavy metal plates. The first 2 opened easily, revealing tanks that were exactly as described in the maintenance records. Clean, properly sealed, showing no signs of the neglect he'd expected. But the 3rd tank was different. The access plate was secured with a lock Marcus didn't recognize. Not the standard industrial padlock used on the others, but something heavier, more sophisticated. The kind of lock you'd use to protect something valuable. Why would one tank need extra security? Marcus tried the keys Earl had given him, but none of them fit. He was about to give up when he noticed something scratched into the metal near the lock numbers that looked like a combination. The lock opened on his 3rd try. Inside, instead of the expected fuel tank access, Marcus found a waterproof container about the size of a briefcase. His hands shook as he lifted it out, the weight telling him it contained something substantial. Documents, hundreds of pages of them, organized in folders and sealed in plastic. As Marcus opened the first folder, his breath caught in his throat. Price-fixing agreements between major oil companies, dating back over a decade. Detailed coordination of fuel costs across the region. Market allocation schemes that divided territory between competitors. Evidence of the most comprehensive antitrust conspiracy he'd ever seen. And it wasn't just local. The documents showed a network spanning multiple states, involving companies that publicly competed but privately coordinated everything from supplier pricing to retail markups. The conspiracy controlled fuel costs for millions of Americans. As the sun set over Route 47, Marcus sat on the concrete steps of his gas station, surrounded by evidence that could destroy some of the biggest corporations in America. No wonder the oil executives had watched his bid so carefully. They knew what was hidden here, but they couldn't retrieve it themselves without admitting knowledge of the conspiracy. They'd been counting on him to either never find it or to be too intimidated to act on it. They were about to learn they'd made a serious miscalculation. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He'd hidden the documents in his apartment, but even there, surrounded by evidence that could change everything, he felt exposed. These weren't just business records. They were proof of criminal conspiracy involving billions of dollars and some of the most powerful corporations in America. The next morning brought visitors. Marcus was cleaning the gas station's windows when a black sedan pulled into the lot. Two men in identical grey suits emerged, their movements precise and coordinated. The passenger carried a briefcase. The driver kept his hand near his jacket in a way that suggested concealed weapon training. "Mr. Rodriguez," the passenger approached with a smile that never reached his eyes. "David Patterson, legal counsel for Consolidated Petroleum Services. This is my associate, Mr. Webb." Marcus set down his cleaning supplies carefully. "Never heard of your company. We represent various interests in the petroleum industry. I understand you've acquired this property recently." "That's right. Is there a problem?" Patterson's smile widened. "Not at all. In fact, we're here with a generous offer. Our clients would like to purchase this station from you. We're prepared to offer $50,000, cash, with closing tomorrow." $50,000 for a station he'd bought for $1. The offer was so far above market value it practically screamed desperation. "That's quite a premium for a failing business," Marcus said carefully. "Our clients see potential you might have missed. Sometimes it's better to take a guaranteed profit than risk the uncertainties of the fuel retail business." Webb, who hadn't spoken, stepped closer. "This business can be dangerous, Mr. Rodriguez. Equipment failures, environmental hazards, liability issues. A lot can go wrong for someone who doesn't understand the industry." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Marcus felt his grandfather's voice echoing in his memory. A man who backs down from bullies spends his whole life backing down. "I appreciate the offer," Marcus said, "but I'm not interested in selling." Patterson's smile finally faded. "Mr. Rodriguez, I don't think you understand the complexity of the situation you've inherited. This property has, complications that someone with your background might find overwhelming." "What kind of complications?" "The kind that could ruin a man's life if he's not careful about how he handles them." Marcus met his stare without flinching. "Then, I guess I'd better be careful." After the men left, Marcus called the one person he knew who might understand what he was dealing with. Tom Bradley answered on the second ring. "Tom, it's Marcus Rodriguez. We met at the auction yesterday. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me." "Shoot, son." "How well did you know Earl Hutchins?" A long pause. "Well enough to know he was scared of something during his last year here." "Why? Did he ever mention any problems with his suppliers? Anything unusual about how his business was being run?" Another pause, longer this time. "Marcus, are you asking these questions because you found something at that station?" "Maybe." "Can you come to my house tonight? And son, don't tell anyone else about this conversation." Tom Bradley lived in a modest ranch house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by oak trees that had probably been there since before Millbrook was incorporated. He answered the door before Marcus could knock, his eyes scanning the street behind him. "Come in quick," Tom said, ushering him inside. "We need to talk." The living room was decorated with photographs spanning decades of small-town life, but Tom led him to the kitchen, away from the windows. "Earl came to see me about 6 months before he gave up the station," Tom began. "He was scared, Marcus. Really scared. Said he'd discovered something about his business that could get him killed." "What kind of something?" "He never told me specifics, but he said the big oil companies had been using his station for something illegal, When he tried to ask questions, they made it clear he should keep his mouth shut and take the money they were paying him. What money? Tom opened a drawer and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He left this with me before he moved away, said if anything happened to him, I should give it to whoever bought the station. The paper contained an address in Dallas and a phone number. Below that, in Earl's handwriting, ask for Jennifer Chen. Tell her about the Millbrook station. She'll know what it means. Who is Jennifer Chen? No idea, but Earl said she was the only person who could help whoever inherited his problem. Marcus studied the paper. Tom, there's something else. I found documents hidden at the station. Evidence of price fixing, market manipulation, conspiracy involving multiple oil companies. Tom's face went pale. Jesus, Marcus. That's what Earl was talking about. He said they'd been using his station as a dead drop for information, paying him to maintain it and keep quiet about what was stored there. Dead drop? Place where conspirators leave messages or documents for each other. Neutral ground where they could coordinate their activities without meeting directly. The pieces were falling into place. The excessive maintenance, the corporate interest in the auction, the immediate offer to buy him out. It all made sense now. The gas station had been the operational center of a massive conspiracy, and Marcus had stumbled into the middle of it. What am I supposed to do with this, Tom? If I try to expose it, they'll destroy me. If I keep quiet, I'm part of the conspiracy. Tom was quiet for a long moment, studying the photographs on his kitchen table. Pictures of Millbrook's main street from decades past, when small businesses thrived and communities controlled their own economic destiny. You know what killed this town, Marcus? It wasn't progress. It wasn't efficiency. It was men in expensive suits who decided that people like us didn't deserve a fair chance to compete. They rigged the game, then told us we lost because we weren't good enough. Tom looked up, his eyes holding the fire of a man who'd watched his community systematically destroyed. Maybe it's time someone rigged it back. Marcus called Jennifer Chen the next morning from a payphone outside the Millbrook library, using coins because he'd started to wonder if his cell phone was being monitored. Ms. Chen, my name is Marcus Rodriguez. Earl Hutchins told someone to give me your number. A sharp intake of breath. Where are you calling from? Millbrook, Texas. I bought Earl's gas station. Jesus Christ, the words came out like a prayer. How much do you know? I found the documents, all of them. Silence stretched across the connection for nearly 30 seconds. Mr. Rodriguez, I need you to listen very carefully. Do not go back to that station alone. Do not discuss this with anyone else. Can you drive to Dallas tonight? I think so. Why? Because I've been waiting 3 years for someone to find those documents, and you're either going to be the key to the biggest antitrust case in American history, or you're going to end up like the last person who tried to expose this conspiracy. What happened to the last person? His car went off a bridge in Oklahoma, officially ruled an accident. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice water. Who are you? Someone who used to work for one of the companies whose documents you found. Someone who tried to blow the whistle and had to disappear to stay alive. Someone who's been gathering evidence for the past 3 years, waiting for the break that would let me come forward safely. What kind of break? Independent corroboration. Documents I couldn't have forged or fabricated. Proof that exists outside the company's control. Marcus understood. Jennifer had evidence, but she needed his discovery to verify it. Together, they might have enough to take down the conspiracy. Separately, they were just targets. Where do you want to meet? Jennifer gave him an address in downtown Dallas and instructions for making sure he wasn't followed. As Marcus hung up the phone, he noticed a familiar black sedan parked across the street from the library. They were watching him. The drive to Dallas took 3 hours, during which Marcus confirmed he was being followed by 2 different vehicles that rotated positions every few miles. Professional surveillance, the kind that suggested his situation was even more serious than he'd imagined. He'd expected to meet Jennifer Chen in some shadowy parking garage or abandoned warehouse. Instead, she'd chosen a crowded restaurant in the heart of the business district, surrounded by witnesses and security cameras. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 35, with the controlled demeanor of someone who'd spent years looking over her shoulder. When Marcus sat down across from her, she didn't offer to shake hands. "Show me your ID," she said quietly. Marcus complied, and she photographed it with her phone before returning it. "I've been Jennifer Chen for 3 years," she said. "Before that, I was Sarah Park, senior accountant for Patterson Energy Systems. I discovered the price-fixing conspiracy by accident while auditing subsidiary company transactions." Patterson Energy Systems. That's not one of the companies in the documents I found. No, but it's the company that coordinated the conspiracy. A shell corporation that facilitated communication and financial transfers between the major oil companies. Think of it as the central nervous system of the whole operation. Jennifer pulled out a tablet and showed Marcus spreadsheets that detailed financial transfers, totaling hundreds of millions of dollars. This is how they did it. Patterson Energy would analyze market conditions and send recommendations to all the participating companies. Price points, territory allocations, supplier agreements, everything coordinated through this single entity. Why hide documents at Earl's Station? Because it was geographically central to their operations, maintained by someone they could control, and completely off the radar of law enforcement. They needed a place where representatives from different companies could leave updates and retrieve instructions without ever meeting directly. And Earl went along with this. Jennifer's expression darkened. Earl thought he was just maintaining unusual security equipment for a technology company. They paid him well and told him it was proprietary business data that needed climate-controlled storage. He didn't realize what he was really protecting until he got curious and looked at some of the documents. That's when they killed him. That's when they tried to. The car accident in Oklahoma was supposed to look like Earl died in a crash while moving away from Millbrook, but Earl wasn't in the car. Marcus stared at her. He's alive. Alive and hidden in witness protection, waiting for someone to find the documents so he can testify safely. The FBI has been protecting him for 2 years, but they couldn't act without independent evidence of the conspiracy. Because anything Earl said could be dismissed as the testimony of a disgruntled former participant. Exactly. But your discovery changes everything. You found the documents through legitimate property ownership, completely independent of Earl's testimony. That makes them admissible evidence that can't be challenged on grounds of fabrication or conspiracy. Jennifer leaned forward, her voice intense but quiet. "Marcus, what you found at that gas station is worth more than money. It's worth justice for millions of Americans who've been paying artificially inflated fuel prices for over a decade. It's worth destroying a conspiracy that's stolen billions of dollars from working families. It's also worth getting killed for. Yes, but here's the thing. They can't kill both of us and make it look accidental. And they can't retrieve the documents without admitting they knew about the conspiracy all along. So, what's the plan?" Jennifer smiled for the first time since he'd met her. "We're going to give them a choice. They can surrender and face antitrust charges, or we're going to destroy them completely." The plan Jennifer outlined was audacious in its simplicity. Rather than hiding from the oil companies, they would force a public confrontation that the corporations couldn't win. "Tomorrow morning," Jennifer explained, "you're going to call a press conference at your gas station. You're going to announce that you've discovered evidence of illegal price fixing and that you're turning it over to the FBI. Won't that just make them more desperate to stop me? That's the point. Once the story is public, they can't eliminate you without confirming the conspiracy exists. Their only option will be to negotiate. Negotiate what? Cooperation with the federal investigation in exchange for reduced penalties. Some executives will go to prison, but the companies will survive. If they choose to fight, we'll destroy them completely in court." Marcus spent that night in a downtown Dallas hotel, barely sleeping, as he rehearsed what he would say to the media. Jennifer had arranged for reporters from 3 major newspapers and 2 television stations to attend, ensuring the story would have immediate national exposure. But when Marcus arrived at his gas station the next morning, he found something that made his blood run cold. The station had been vandalized overnight. Windows smashed, pumps damaged, graffiti spray-painted across the walls. But this wasn't random destruction. Someone had been searching for something. The office had been torn apart methodically. File cabinets overturned, ceiling tiles pulled down, even sections of drywall cut open. They'd been looking for the documents. Marcus's phone rang as he surveyed the damage. Impressive work. David Patterson's voice was smooth, confident. Professional searchers, Mr. Rodriguez. The kind who know how to find things that are hidden. You didn't find what you were looking for. No, but we confirmed it's not at the station, which means you have it somewhere else. That makes you extremely valuable to us, or extremely dangerous. Both, which is why I'm calling with a revised offer. $500,000 for the documents and your agreement to leave Texas permanently. Final offer. Marcus looked around at the destruction surrounding him. These men had revealed the true extent of their desperation. Mr. Patterson, I have a counteroffer for you. I'm listening. Go to hell. Patterson's laugh was cold. Mr. Rodriguez, you've made the same mistake many ambitious young men make. You've confused courage with stupidity. When the press arrives this morning, they're going to find a very different story than the one you're planning to tell. What do you mean? Check your email, Eck. Marcus opened his phone to find a message containing photographs and documents he'd never seen before. Images that appeared to show him meeting with known drug dealers. Financial records suggesting he'd been involved in money laundering. Police reports claiming he'd been under investigation for months. Professional forgeries, Patterson continued, but convincing enough to destroy your credibility. When you try to tell your story about oil company conspiracies, the media will be more interested in your alleged criminal activities. Nobody will believe this. They don't have to believe it. They just have to doubt you enough to ignore what you're saying. And by the time the truth comes out, our documents will have disappeared and our people will have developed amnesia about any alleged conspiracies. Marcus felt the trap closing around him. They'd neutralized his ability to go public without destroying the documents. And without media attention, he'd be an easy target for permanent elimination. But Patterson had made one mistake. He'd assumed Marcus would be facing this fight alone. Mr. Patterson, Marcus said, you should check your email. While Patterson had been threatening Marcus, Jennifer Chen had been busy. Her message contained FBI raid footage from Patterson Energy Systems headquarters in Houston, along with arrests warrants for 17 executives from 6 different oil companies. What the hell is this? Patterson's composure finally cracked. That is what happens when someone underestimates a senior accountant who's been building a federal case for 3 years. While you were busy trying to intimidate me, Agent Chen was providing the FBI with every piece of evidence she'd gathered, plus the documents I found at the station. Agent Chen? Jennifer Chen, FBI Financial Crimes Division. Did you really think someone could steal hundreds of pages of incriminating documents from Patterson Energy Systems and not get caught? She's been undercover for 3 years, building this case from the inside. The phone went silent for nearly a minute. This is impossible, Patterson finally whispered. It's over, Mr. Patterson. Your conspiracy is finished, your colleagues are in custody, and your choice now is whether to cooperate with the federal investigation or spend the rest of your life in prison. Through his broken windows, Marcus could see the first FBI vehicles arriving at the station, followed by news vans from the media outlets Jennifer had contacted. The story was about to become public in a way Patterson couldn't control or suppress. Marcus walked outside to meet the agents, leaving Patterson listening to dead air. 6 months later, Marcus Rodriguez stood behind the counter of Rodriguez Energy Services, watching customers fill their tanks with fuel priced 30 cents per gallon, lower than the major chains charged. The investigation had revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. 17 executives had been indicted, 6 companies had paid fines totaling $1.2 billion, and federal oversight had been imposed on petroleum pricing throughout the region. The documents Marcus found had been the key evidence that made prosecution possible. But the real victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the transformation of Millbrook itself. The settlement money had funded a community energy cooperative that allowed local businesses to purchase fuel at wholesale prices. Small gas stations that had been driven out of business by the conspiracy were reopening. The economic stranglehold that had been choking the town for over a decade was finally broken. Tom Bradley entered the station carrying the morning newspaper, his face beaming with satisfaction. "Lead story again," he said, placing the paper on the counter. "Senate hearings on petroleum industry regulations start next week." Marcus glanced at the headline. "Millbrook whistleblower testifies before Congress." The article included his photograph alongside Jennifer Chen, who had received a commendation for her undercover work. "Still can't believe it sometimes," Marcus admitted. "6 months ago I was unemployed and desperate. Now I'm testifying before Congress about corporate crime." "You know what I can't believe?" Tom settled into the chair Marcus had placed behind the counter for his daily visits. "That they thought a small-town mechanic wouldn't have the courage to stand up to them." Marcus laughed. "Maybe they should have offered me a job instead of trying to intimidate me." "Speaking of jobs," Tom pulled out a folded letter. "Got something for you. Recognition from the Small Business Administration. They want to feature your station as a model for community-based energy independence." The letter offered Marcus a chance to consult with other communities facing similar corporate manipulation, an opportunity to help level the playing field for small businesses across the country. "What do you think?" Tom asked. Marcus looked around his station. The pumps were busy, the convenience store was stocked with products from local suppliers, and through the window, he could see construction beginning on 2 new businesses that were opening because fuel costs had dropped enough to make operations profitable. "I think Earl Hutchins would be proud," Marcus said. "And I think there are probably a lot of other communities that could use some help fighting back against companies that think they can rig the game." Earl Hutchins had indeed been proud. He'd returned to Millbrook for the trial, emerging from witness protection to testify about his years of unknowing participation in the conspiracy. The man who'd been forced to abandon his business and his community had finally seen justice served. More importantly, he'd seen his sacrifice mean something. The information he'd preserved and the courage he'd shown in protecting it had ultimately freed an entire region from corporate manipulation. As the afternoon wound down, Marcus began closing procedures that had become routine. Counting the register, securing the office, checking the pumps that now displayed honest prices for honest fuel. But tonight, for the first time in months, he also performed one additional task. He walked to the spot where the 3rd underground tank had been, where he'd discovered the documents that changed everything. A small memorial plaque had been installed there, paid for by the community, and inscribed with words chosen by Earl Hutchins himself. "In memory of all the small businesses destroyed by corporate greed, and in honor of those who refuse to accept that might makes right." Below that, in smaller text, "The truth is worth defending, no matter how much it costs." Marcus touched the plaque briefly, then walked back to his car. Tomorrow would bring new customers, new challenges, and new opportunities to prove that honest business could compete with corporate manipulation. But tonight, he was just a man who'd bought a gas station for $1 and discovered that sometimes the smallest investments yield the greatest returns. Not in money, but in justice. Not in profit, but in hope. And sometimes, when you're lucky enough and brave enough, in the chance to change the world. If you enjoyed this incredible story of one man's courage against corporate corruption, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next amazing business story. You can watch it right here on your screen now.